What do you do on Sundays?
We talk about Cate Blanchett, the acting, the costumes, the awards, but mostly the Blanchett of it all.
I'm not acting.
You think this is a love affair?
I saw you, Erica. Meeting in the middle.
This is Sundays with Cate, and I'm your host, Murtada Elfadl. Welcome to Sundays with Cate, the podcast series about the films of Cate Blanchett. Each week, we choose a Cate Blanchett film and discuss it with a guest. And my guest for today's episode is a returning guest, is writer and critic Andrew Kendall. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Murtada. Thanks for having me back to talk about Cate.
You're welcome. You were one of my very first guests in the first few weeks of the podcast when we talked about The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Yes, Cate at her resplendent height.
Yeah, she looked really, I thought, the best. I used to think she looked the best in Benjamin Button, and then I just saw The Man Who Cried, which we covered on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and she looks amazing in that movie.
She's quite pretty in that, though. But we're going a completely different route from pretty today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this is, we're going absolutely different. So this is just a few years after The Man Who Cried. So we're talking about the 2003 movie, The Missing, directed by Ron Howard. And this movie, in my memory, I saw it in the cinema because I was at the height of my new love affair with Cate and how much I loved her. So I was waiting for months for this movie to come out because it was a major release. I was living in North Carolina at the time, and I went to the theater and saw it. And I remember being very disappointed, but also it's always linked in my memory to, in the run-up to it, in the press that she did in the run-up to, she did Inside the Actor Studio. And so when you watch her episode of Inside the Actor Studio, there's a lot of like, how was it like working with Ron Howard? How about The Missing? And I was trying to find that episode, but they vanished from YouTube.
I'm curious to hear like what your expectations were for the film and like why it disappointed you.
So I remember, Ron Howard was coming off A Beautiful Mind, which A Beautiful Mind, whatever we think of it, is a movie that was successful at the box office and with awards bodies. It won several Oscars, and Cate was still in the hunt for her Oscar. So,
Yeah,
and as
she was still chasing her second nomination, actually.
Exactly, and she did all these movies between Elizabeth and The Aviator that were always, she even said it in one of her interviews after she won for The Aviator. She said something like, "Oh, I hope now they can stop releasing every movie I'm in December." So she knew that distributors and people maybe managing her career were expecting her to win that Oscar. And so every movie that she was in, it was like, this is the one. This is the one. She's going to win an Oscar. And teaming up with the director who just won Best Director and Best Film a couple of years before this movie, they're like, all right, and it's a Western. And she's Joan Wayne in The Searchers. This is going to be it. She's winning the Oscar.
And like, it's funny that you say that, though, because I have this false memory that I swear that Cate Blanchett got a Golden Globe nomination for her performance in this. And so while I was preparing to come on the podcast, I was just like looking at stuff and I was like, that didn't happen. And I swear in my head that this happened, but clearly it didn't. And it's so interesting because like, the film didn't have that sort of resonance as like the immediate last Howard film, but it is a film where she is giving a very solid performance. And that was an interesting year in cinema, 2003. And like it's very of that time in a way. I can't think of a movie released in the last 2 years that started like aligned with The Missing. It's very much they don't make movies like this anymore. Not in a good or a bad way. They just don't really make these kinds of weird swerves, I guess. Because like you said, it is a Western. Ron Howard is not known for making Westerns.
Yeah.
And one thing I do appreciate about Ron Howard is that he's not somebody you think of like as a risky filmmaker, but he obviously is interested in like stepping outside of his typical box. So I always feel this sort of a weird sympathy for him. I mean, like he has an Oscar and all that money, so he doesn't need my sympathy. But I think people kind of like put him in this box as this director that just does Oscar bait movies, which doesn't really mean anything, anyways. But like, this is the man who did The Grinch with Jim Carrey. Like, he did Parenthood. He's doing The Missing. Like, he's not only doing biopics and whatnot. I mean, he doesn't always do them successfully, but he does do things that you start to think, okay, I didn't expect him to do that. So I'll give him that at least. It's an unusual swerve after winning an Oscar for A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah, and not only winning an Oscar, it was a successful movie, and he also had a big hit right before it was How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So basically, this was a time in his career where he was like, "Here it is, the keys to the kingdom. What do you want to do next?" And he chose to
Yeah.
do this movie. So it's interesting from that. We'll get to Ron Howard, but my opinion of him is that I never know what he's obsessed with. Like usually with directors like who have a vision and a footprint and who've been working for decades, you can kind of know what they're mostly obsessed with. But Ron Howard, his movies are just so different from one to the other. He
Yeah,
did.
he's not the auteur type. And like, I mean, like, I don't think that he is the best director. I mean, he definitely has limitations, but I do think that sort of predisposes persons not to really care for him very much because he doesn't have a calling card. He doesn't have something distinct. It's just like a series. He's very much like one of those like 1930s or 40s directors that would just do like a string of movies. They were just like a hired hand in a way. And I think that sort of makes him seem sort of just very sort of like a nebulous person, the directing canon.
Yeah, absolutely. He's totally, you're right on the money. He's a hired hand. And not only is he a hired hand to just do things that he might be interested in, he's a hired hand to even fix other studio movies, as evidenced by
Yeah.
what he did in Star Wars. So,
Yeah.
and from what I gather about Ron Howard is that he is a very nice person. He's one of the nicest people in Hollywood, which is basically a town of assholes. So I think that also makes people just want to work with him.
Yeah, I've always thought, and I thought this watching The Missing, and I mean, this sounds like an insult, but I always thought that Ron Howard would make a better producer than a director. Because, like, you look at his films, and even when they don't work, and fine, some of them don't work, you can see something there that would have made him interested. And you start to think, okay, if you just given this to this person or that person, like, it probably would have come together a bit more effectively. Even in his bad movies, actors do good work in his films. And Cate is great in this movie. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast and you love her. She is great in this movie. Like, of that string of early 2000s performances, like, I mean, she had quite a big string, and I always rep for Bandits. But this
Yes.
is my favorite of that 2000, 2003 stretch of films. She's just like really good in it, and she's good in a way that I don't think that we get to see her be in a way.
Yes, and this is a different performance. I do agree with you. So let's dig into The Missing. But before we
Yes.
do that, you were right. She was nominated for a Golden Globe in 2003, but it was for Veronica Guerin. So this movie and Veronica Guerin came out within weeks of each other. But obviously, Veronica Guerin,
Busy girl.
yeah, she did a lot in those years. And I always think of like those years are where she experimented and did so much work. Different genres, different directors
Yeah.
that made her sort of the captivating screen star that we know now. Because even somebody as majorly talented as Cate Blanchett also needs to put in hours in front of cameras and in film studios to
Yeah.
learn the craft, because she is a theater actor, and she did that
Yeah.
really well. So The Missing came out in 2003. It is, as we said, directed by Ron Howard. It's set in 1885, so about 20 years after the American Civil War, in New Mexico, where a frontier medicine woman, so Cate Blanchett plays Maggie Gillickson. So it's Dr. Blanchett, medicine woman. She's a healer, and she has a father with whom she has a complicated relationship. He abandoned her and her mother when she was a child, and subsequently her mom died. She was raped. She had a very tough life. And so he comes back into her life trying to make amends, to reconcile. She rebuffs him, but then she has two daughters, one a teenager played by Evan Rachel Wood, and somebody who is maybe 10, 9, something like that, and that's played by Jenna Boyd. So the older daughter is kidnapped, and so then she has to team up with her dad because he's a tracker and he's been living among some of the Apache Indian communities. So she teams up with him so that they can track the people who kidnapped her daughter, and basically that's the story of the film.
Know this Indian?
No, Indian.
Damn well looks Indian to me.
No, he's my father.
The Missing is sort of like a road movie, but it's depressing. Like, you know, two people who are trying to reconnect, get together, and when I was watching it this week, it made me think. It's such a different movie. It made me think of On the Rocks, the Sophie Coppola movie.
Mm.
And I mean, obviously, On the Rocks is not about anybody being raped or kidnapped, but it's that sort of like vibe between Bill Murray and Rashida Jones. Sort of like they're reconnecting with a sort of very sort of complicated father-daughter relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And The Missing, except for, you know, the kidnapping, is very much about that sort of, you know, let's go on a trek through the US and see how these different places make us relate to each other.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of the same premise, right? It's although Rashida Jones and Bill Murray are not estranged exactly, but they have sort of a strained relationship. And in this, it's strained. It's I mean, Maggie completely does not have to do anything with her dad. She doesn't even want to talk to him. She's first introduced, which is funny because she's first introduced actually defecating in the commode. So that's the first thing that you see her in. And when I saw that first scene in the movie, I was like, oh, Frances McDormand in Nomadland is not the first movie star to be shown doing that on camera. But
like, I mean, even though she's in the outhouse, it sounds like rough and gritty. She looks very pretty, actually. Like, her head is leaned against and then her daughter, the younger one, comes knocking at the door. And it made me think, like, that's what parenthood is. You will never get a moment of peace.
Exactly. You're not really shown anything. It's mostly on her face, yes.
You do talk about her face, though, and it's very much a performance that depends on the work that she does without speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, like you explained the plot of the movie. So she's living with her boyfriend, played by Aaron Eckhart. He's the one that meets her dad first, not knowing it's her dad. And he invites him up to the house to get dinner. And Tommy Lee Jones, who plays her dad, emerges from the shadows. And we have Kate reacting to him. She doesn't say anything at first. It's just like a 10-second stretch of silence. We watch the emotions play across her face and we're like, okay, this is serious business. And it sort of sets up the way throughout the course of the film, she is sort of like wrestling with her own internal feelings because they are estranged, but also many people who have tough relationships with their parents, you can't completely remove yourself from them. So she plays that sort of push and pull. The lines are doing one thing, but like facially, she's started doing something else in a way. And so it's sort of a very like complex performance, even if the film isn't really as complex. Like Kate's character is written in a very sort of like generous way, and she really kind of takes that and runs with it.
And I think she's really matched well with Tommy Lee Jones as her dad. Like they play well as two idiosyncratic people who are sort of, you know, loners. They're a little bit gruff. They don't show their emotions a lot. I mean, there are scenes that explain why she's gruff, where her, you know, they tell us that she's had a hard life and she has nightmares and she can never connect. And, you know, even though she has this loving relationship with the Aaron Eckhart character, she refuses to marry him. Obviously, she's been hurt and she doesn't want to be hurt again, even though there is a wonderful scene between her and Aaron Eckhart where it shows us that this woman really loves this man and is into him. But also, like her dad, she just can't go deeper into connections. And so I think they're matched really well and are believable as a father and daughter. And I would have...
Yeah, they are.
And if this was On the Rocks and it was just about that relationship, I think it would have been a better movie. But then, of course, we have to go on these rescue missions and gunfights. And I can't believe this movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. Like,
Howard is more interested in the father-daughter relationship than he is in the bigger mystery. Like, I mean, those scenes have an energy that the rest of the film doesn't. And I think what sort of complicates the film is that we don't just spend time with the family, we spend a lot of time with the kidnappers and like following their trick. And it sort of interrupts the momentum of the film in a way. And like I get what he's trying to do, but if there's, I mean, even if people don't like him, I think one thing that Howard worked well at is family dynamics. Like my favorite movie of his is probably Parenthood, because he gets that kind of weird family ambivalence very well. He's not a great thriller director. And so many of those kidnapping scenes depend on things that don't really play to his strength. So like in those person-to-person scenes with Cate and Tommy Lee Jones, it's really propulsive and good. And then we go to these kidnappings and it's like, okay, this isn't really working as well.
It's not like, and then there is a lot of also action sequences, and he has made some action movies, but I've never seen those Tom Hanks as angel. What are they called? Those movies, Angels and Insects.
Oh yeah, Angels and Demons, the Da Vinci Code movies.
Angels and Demons. Like I'm assuming they're action movies, but I don't think he's like good at action, because the action here, there's a lot of gunfights and running around and people on horseback, and it's kind of tedious. Like I was just not into those scenes at all. I was like, can I fast forward this?
It worked, and I mean the action scenes work better when they're centered on the characters.
And as for Cate, I really love the moments where she is doing her work as a medicine woman or as a healer. Like the movie starts with her seeing a patient, being a dentist, taking a tooth out. And then in the middle of the movie, one of their company gets shot and she also heals him. And so those scenes, like seeing this woman at work doing what she does best, I think were my favorite time just in this movie watching Cate. So and I wanted to see a little bit more of that.
What I really appreciate about the film is that Howard has sort of a generosity of spirit in the way he represents women's issues, and I think the film, it doesn't do that very sort of conventional or boring, this is a feminist film by a man and look at how she's perfect and she's a superhero. She's just a woman who's trying to make her way in this very difficult circumstance. And it doesn't try to like hit home, that she's a woman, she's struggling. It's just instead presenting her as a person living in this sort of very transitioning period, and what she does to survive. It's a survival story ultimately. And I do think that if the film sort of focused on her with impunity, instead of making it a story about larger issues, it would have been a little bit more like effective. Because like I said, it's 2 hours, 15 minutes, and it does feel like in the last 40 minutes that we're doing a lot here, like a lot of plates spinning.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back, right? They go on a rescue mission and it fails, and then they go on another rescue mission, and I feel like there's too many rescue missions, and maybe they could have done one. There's no need for all of that. And I would have liked to see more scenes between Cate and Tommy Lee, because I think they really work well together. And I'm surprised they've never worked again. And it's like if you had asked me who would I want to see Cate work with, I would have never said Tommy Lee Jones, because he's somebody that I don't think of as somebody who works, who acts well with other people or has chemistry with other people. I think of him as a good actor who's sometimes funny, but he's more about taking charge of the scenes, right? It's not like, oh, let me pair Tommy Lee Jones with someone else. But
it's funny, though. I mean, this is such a digression, but when I think of Tommy Lee Jones in acting, though, like I kept meaning to like research it, but he is one of the few actors I know who is present in two people's Oscar clips in one ceremony. So in 1994, when Jessica Lange won for Blue Sky, her clip is the clip that they show of her is her acting opposite him, and then Susan Sarandon was up that same year in The Client, and her clip is up against him. And it was such a funny, because I know like there have been times where like actors are in many movies, but like but I've never seen it where the clip itself shows both of them in, it was really interesting. So like, I get what you mean. Though. He's very much of like a fuddy-duddy sort of character, like, on his own, doing his own thing. He's not somebody you think of as being like somebody who's gonna like create chemistry with someone, but he does have chemistry with her because, like you say, they're both weird people.
Yeah, they're very weird, and they're both playing loners. Like Cate doesn't always play loners, but I think Tommy Lee Jones always plays loners. And so here he is paired with her, and they're both playing loners, and it just works. It just works that these two stubborn people who just are not that interested into each other. And then in the end, you know, they don't come to like, oh, lovey-dovey or anything. It's just a little thaw in their relationships. Like they come to maybe respect each other, some of the choices that they might have made that got them estranged. And then of course, you know, spoiler, he does the ultimate sacrifice, which he sacrifices himself to save her. So in the end, he gave her the ultimate gift, right? So the gift of life.
No, listening to you talk about their chemistry, which was not the first thing I think about watching the movie, is like, no, I want to watch them do a remake of On the Rocks, Sophia.
Yeah, totally. It would totally work if they do that. They could be, you know, modern urban people. They can pull that. They don't have to be in the 1880s.
Speaking of chemistry in the movie, though, I really enjoy Kate's chemistry with her daughter in the film. Not Evan Rachel Wood's
Jenna Boyd, yes.
Racist character. But where is Jenna Boyd now?
I have no idea. I mean,
because if you go to the awards page for the film, like she got a ton of nominations for young actors, and she is good in the film. Like it's a very good child performance, and she has really strong chemistry with Kate. And some of my favorite scenes are the ones with her. Like, I mean, it occurred to me watching this that we don't very often see Kate playing opposite children.
No, I mean, unless you count Rindy and Carol. Which...
Yeah, and like even then, like I can't even remember what Rindy looks like. Like we don't see, like
she's
we don't
not
even
a character.
see her. Yeah, we don't see her as mothers either very often. Like this was one of I was trying to like go through the filmography. I think this is one of her first role where the mother arc is like dominant in it, and probably one of the most dominant. And it sort of is complicated because we don't see very much of Evan Rachel Wood's character with Kate. Like she leaves quite early on, and the entire drive of the film is that she's looking for her daughter.
Yeah.
But the reason I buy into that is because her chemistry with Jenna Boyd is so good that I'm willing to believe that it's that same instinct with her other daughter, because she really is great with Jenna Boyd. One of the things that I really like in the film is so she goes off with her dad looking for her older daughter. And the younger daughter is like, you can't leave me here. I'm going to come looking for you. And she has this negotiation where she's like, okay, fine, you're going to come with us. You really feel the subtext of that relationship. Like you believe that this is Maggie's daughter, that this is... It's very much Kate and Tommy Lee Jones and Jenna sort of carrying that weight of it. Like we believe them, so we believe the movie in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I love the performance of Jenna Boyd, and I am somebody who doesn't always respond to child actors because, you know, even if they're good, that means there is that means they're being precocious, they're being unlike children are. So child acting is not something I respond to. But this performance is really good. Like this young woman, the child, I think she was 10 or 9 when the movie was made. It's so believable as somebody who lives in the 1880s. She's so believable as somebody who grew up in that environment. She's so believable as somebody who has maybe seen a lot more violence that she should have for somebody at 10. And so it's such a good performance, and she does have great chemistry. And it's not like, you know, it's a lovey-dovey mother-daughter relationship. It's also a strained relationship because the Maggie character played by Kate is somebody who cannot show love. So this young child is starved for affection from her mother. And it's still
because Maggie treats her like a co-worker in a way. Like when we first meet her daughter, actually, she is helping her to remove the tooth from the old woman. So it's very much like she's less of a child who's being nurtured and more like she's an apprentice.
Yeah, she's her assistant.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's the one who is more like her mother. She is tough. She is, and Evan Rachel Wood sort of plays the lazy girl who's into dresses and who, like, there is a very funny moment for Jenna Boyd where she makes fun of her older sister for dressing up to work. I don't remember what she exactly said, but she's like, you look stupid wearing all this just to work. So this is the daughter that is like Maggie, and it's really a good performance. Evan Rachel Wood is this the same year as 13?
It is the same year 13, and she stole Kate's nomination at the Golden Globe for Missing by being nominated in 13. I kid. She's good in 13. I'm just standing up for Ron Howard's work here.
Yes, totally. And this is such a terribly written part. So I felt bad for Evan Rachel Wood.
Is it badly written though? Like, I mean, I like Evan Rachel Wood, but I don't think that she's on the same wavelength with the film. Watching the film, and this is what we were saying a few minutes ago, Kate and Tommy Lee Jones and even Jenna, like, they are able to play the abrasiveness of their characters. And I feel like watching Evan Rachel Wood, she's trying to like lean away from the abrasiveness, so it comes off as very superficial in a way.
So she is sort of like the character who's least sympathetic. So let's set it up.
Yeah.
So she is the older daughter, and it is implied that Maggie, the character played by Kate, was raped. And so this daughter is the result of that rape. And the character of the younger daughter even says in one scene that she avoids looking at her. Like, so they're showing us that this older daughter is somebody who maybe Maggie doesn't care for that much because of the circumstances of her conception. And then she's shown to us, I think, and then she's given this horrible scene where Maggie and her dad send a friend of theirs who is Native American to save her. And so Kate gives him, she's like, my daughter will not trust an Indian. So she gives him her necklace. She's like, show her this and then she will trust you. And she, of course, does the exact opposite of that. Like, he shows her the necklace and she starts screaming and he is killed. And so the character, when I was saying that she's badly written, is that she is set up as this awful person. And like, you know, this is a movie set in 1885, so when there was a lot of violence. It's realistic. Yes.
Her character would be a racist, though. It's a bad union of the script, the direction, and the way that I think Evan Rachel Wood sort of inhabits her. It just doesn't quite work. Like, you can see where it could work, because in a way, her relationship with Lily is sort of mirroring the way that her dad and her have that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I said that the character is badly written, it's not because she is presented as a colonizer and the worst colonizer and an unsympathetic racist, which obviously even Maggie herself is prejudiced and is shown to be prejudiced against the Native Americans. But what I was thinking about when I said the character was badly written is that it probably needed a couple more scenes to set up this relationship. So if to what you were saying, if this is truly the mirror relationship of Maggie and her dad, is that Maggie and Lily is the mirror relationship, then you need to give me one more scene between Kate and Evan Rachel Wood to show.
Oh, that's definitely true.
But, you know, she's just shown as this somebody who doesn't care, who's lazy, doesn't care about work, and then she's a racist, she's a colonizer, and then we spend the whole movie trying to fucking save this bitch, and we don't care about her.
Like, a few films do that thing where they set up a relationship very briefly, but you spend the entire film depending on it. Evan Rachel Wood and Kate don't have that moment where at least we can say, okay, yes, I understand why we would spend the entire film looking for this girl, when it seems like they don't even have that connection. So you are right on that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just like the movie is trying to tell us, oh, she's a mother. Of course, she's going to look for her daughter, which we know, maternal instinct and all of that. Yes, it's believable, but also like, show me the relationship between these two women. Because even the reconciliation at the end between them, which is very brief, like I thought if we spent 2 hours trying to save this girl, like we'll at least have some catharsis in the relationship. Like, at least if you're not going to set it up at the beginning, give me a good scene at the end where they reconcile, where it doesn't need to be something that they verbalize, because Maggie, as played by Kate, is not somebody who talks a lot. And you have such a great actor in Cate Blanchett. Give me a scene where these two characters come to some sort of understanding, because she just spent weeks and weeks trying to save her, losing her dad, losing her friends, losing other people who came up on this rescue mission, who all die in the way to save this, frankly, stupid little girl.
I can't argue with that. Lily is definitely the least compelling arc in the film.
But a character that I really wanted to see more of, and who, Aaron Eckhart is really wonderful in this movie because he literally has
Yeah.
maybe 4 scenes or 3.5.
And they're all great.
They're all great. He shows us who this man is. He is a rancher. He lives on the ranch. So I'm assuming he maybe started as a helping hand that she hired, and then they formed a friendship and then a love affair. And all of these things are never told. So this is all from his performance. Like, I have built a complete life for this person based on that performance. And in 3 brief scenes, one with Tommy and a couple with Cate, and that's it. And I wanted, and of course, for the story, he has to be murdered and really has to be kidnapped.
And he dies really early, actually.
Yeah.
And it's another scene where Kate has a lot of nonverbal work when she sees his dead body.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And it's an early scene. It sort of tells you that The Missing is not gonna be a comfortable watch in a way, because the way that it sets up Brake's character is that you don't think he's gonna die. Like, there's no suggesting that he is going to die. He doesn't even die on screen. It's off screen.
So yeah, he dies really early. And I think Aaron Eckhart has this niche in his career of supporting
Playing second fiddle to popular women.
Yeah, and not just popular women, like big Oscar-winning stars. So, of course, the most famous of that is Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. Yeah. And then 3 years later, he does this movie. And then a few years after this, he supports the other Australian star, Nicole Kidman, in Rabbit Hole.
I mean, I was going to say that I used to love Aaron Eckhart, but I don't not love him anymore. He just doesn't really act in things that I really find interesting. Like, I love him in Rabbit Hole. Like, I think he is really good in that, in a way that I don't think that many of his contemporaries would be or could be. Like, he has there's a lot of ego in his acting, and it comes through in the characters he plays. Like, in Erin Brockovich too, he's willing to not take over a scene, for example. Like, he is someone who's a very generous actor. Like, he's somebody who I think works well with people.
Yeah, and that's probably why he got cast in these movies, because you need male stars usually, and he's not like a star on a level. He's not a star on the level of Blanchett or Kidman or Roberts, obviously. So that's probably why he got cast. But also, they want somebody who will be willing to sort of play second fiddle in every scene in the movie.
But he needs to also be handsome enough that you would understand why someone would want him. Yes. But he can't be too much that you find yourself overwhelmed by him. And I think he gets that. I can see why kids would want him.
Yeah.
But also he doesn't overpower the film.
Yeah. And to your point about the movies he's making now, I think he's in all of those Has Fallen movies. I've never seen those. I'll never see them. So I don't know what he's up to, but I don't know. Aaron Eckhart, if you're listening to this podcast, get you some Oscar-winning actress and get it in their next movie. Who else can you do? Aaron Eckhart. And also, if we're talking about the actors in this movie, I was surprised to see Elizabeth Moss. She has a tiny part as one of the other women kidnapped along with Rachel Wood. She's a young mother. So I didn't know Elizabeth Moss was in 2 Cate Blanchett movies, because years later, she is also in Truth.
She's definitely more interesting than Evan Rachel Wood.
Yeah, even though it's a tiny part.
Exactly.
I think this is one of the questions that we talked about in the last episode that I did with Izzy, which we talked about Elizabeth, the Golden Age, was like, who of younger actresses remind us of Cate? And when I think of Cate, and last week we mentioned Carrie Coon, we mentioned Carey Mulligan, we mentioned Saoirse Ronan, we mentioned Elizabeth Debicki, but I wanted to talk to you about this, Andrew, because when I think of Cate, I think of somebody who is very commanding in the screen, who knows how she looks in the frame of the movie, who has a distinctive voice that she modulates to play characters. She's also somebody who is not afraid of showing the artifice in acting. I know that a lot of sort of younger actors are taught to underplay, to be subtle, to not
Everything naturalism. I hate naturalism.
Yeah. And, Cate is somebody, acting is not real. Acting is a talent and it is a profession. And there is a lot of artifice to acting because you are recreating something that is not real. And so she's somebody who goes for the big moment. Like if you see her signature performances in Blue Jasmine, she is playing Jasmine, but also she is playing Jasmine, playing a version of Jasmine. And in Carol, which is the other great performance, she is playing Carol, but she is also playing Carol as seen by Therese. So there are layers of artifice and layers of acting upon acting in her performances. And this is kind of sort of why I love Cate and why I always am excited to watch her. And so when I was thinking of who does that, I kind of came like nobody who's, under 35 does that anymore.
I was struggling to even think of who are young actresses. So clearly I have the two of us and like all of our colleagues, like we came to, a lot of film with Cate, with Nicole, with Helena. And instead of us started like moving to the next generation, we just stayed with them.
Yes, totally.
So it's like I'm already checking for. I'm still checking for Cate. I'm still checking for Nicole. Like that's where I'm looking. Like I mean, but of that generation, they're all so distinct. Like I can't think of like parallel for any of them. But I do think that Florence maybe has that same sort of vibe.
Florence Pugh.
Especially because I think something that I like about Cate, which is something that I like about my other Cate, Hepburn, is that there is an androgynousness to their acting, but it's not. But it's androgynous. It's not that they have. It's not maleness. It's just it's not like they have like male sensibilities. It's very much this sort of androgyny, I think.
Yeah,
I think that Florence sort of has that. Even when they're being very girly, it's still sort of like weirdly subversive in a way.
As if they don't think of sex, as they don't have in some of their performances, they don't have any sort of traits from a particular sex. They're above that.
God, like I remember this clip from the Oscar THR Roundtable in 2010 with Annette Bening and Kidman and Portman. They were talking about Milos Forman and how he would direct them to act in period pieces, and he would always tell them, like stop holding the glass like this and stop walking like that. And I think the Cate does that. Like it doesn't seem like someone translated to their acting in the movie. It's just like a regular person. Yeah. She's very messy and very sort of like, but she's also not like overplaying it. She's not doing like a de-glam role. And I think like it's a really like, I mean, I know The Missing is not, it's not like her best work, that's because she has so much good work.
Yeah.
But what she's doing is it's so incisive, but it's also like really hard. Yeah. Because she can't like overplay the androgynousness or overplay like the ugliness of the character, but she also can't be affected. And she finds that sweet spot. And you believe that this is a woman who has been raped, who has had to struggle her entire life, who has had to build this home. And you invest yourself in that headspace in a way that I think that like actors can also be auteurs in a way. And Cate is shaping this movie. Yeah. In significant ways. Like she's shaping the beats in the way that we respond to the people around her. And even if The Missing isn't great, it's a film where I think she's able to do stuff that sort of informs her later career. Like she doesn't do another Western in this vein again, but you can see the beginnings of her like solidifying how she can sort of command a screen and command the story and sort of like affect that sort of dynamic in a way. So like I can see like, for example, a clear like through line from like what she's doing here and what she's sort of doing in Elizabeth the Golden Age in a way.
Yeah. That's exactly the movie I was going to mention, because she is believable in The Missing as somebody who lived in 1885. Like this is definitely not, there are no modern mannerisms at all to Maggie. And it's very evident in this performance. And to what you were talking about, is this is about androgyny. This is somebody who did both tasks in the frontier of a man and of a woman, because for a long time it was just her and her daughters. All of that is very believable in the physicality of the way she moves, of the way she rides a horse. And then, yeah, exactly to what you were saying about Elizabeth the Golden Age, just a few years later, you know, there she's shown as this monarch who is leading the troops into the battle against the battle against the Spanish Armada. So there is a sort of the same sort of physicality of these women who are not in a traditional female role, taking charge, and especially, you know, in those olden times, taking charge and moving on. And Cate brings that out without calling too much attention to it.
I like the idea of presenting acting as artificial, but this is one of the rare moments where she doesn't go big.
She doesn't. No, yeah, you're right.
And I mean, like, people know that Cate is a great actress, but like, even within knowing that, I think we sort of like take for granted how much she can do and does do. And like, she's playing a very different version of her talents here. Like, it's very much that sort of like naturalistic vibe, and it's very different from Elizabeth, even though it's similar. So like, thematically you can see the parallel, but then in the way that she's doing it, it's very different. And I think, like, she's not a repetitious actor. You know, she's not doing the same thing over and over again. Like there are nuances and gradations there. And I think the missing is, it's a very like important pillar in the development of who Cate would become by 2007, for example. Because like, I watched this, and the first thing that I thought watching was like, she looks so young. Like, she looks so young here. This is before like she became like, you know, the Cate Blanchett. She was still sort of like finding her way in a way. Not that talent-wise, just like getting attention.
Yeah, totally. And she is young making this movie. I think she was 33 when this movie was made.
I mean, like, I think every generation says that, but who's 33 now? Like, I don't see any 33-year-old actresses now doing this movie, except for maybe Carrie. Carrie's 35, so she doesn't count.
One thing that, you know, as we were talking, that I was reminded of, like, you know, in this podcast, a theme that we do is that we always talk about how physical a performer Cate is. And I was thinking of the way that she plays Maggie. And it is very physical because there's a lot of riding horses. There is a lot of moving there. You know, she's healing, so she's moving and she's cutting and she's doing a lot of things with her body. But to what you were saying, she does not call too much attention to that, even though she is doing a lot. And when you compare that physicality to, for instance, her performance as Bob Dylan, which she really fills the frame. And there she is doing a lot, but it's also very memorable and very, very sort of in a way beautiful to see, because Bob Dylan's slouching as he walks, or Bob Dylan sitting in that press conference scene where he does not sit still for even 1 second. And there she is calling attention to every move of her body as Bob Dylan, while here she is moving just as much, but she is not calling attention at all. So this is where I do agree with you when you were talking about how much more she underplays here, how subtle this performance is.
And I think she understands this woman. She understands that as a woman in that time, Maggie's survival depends on her not calling attention to herself. She's doing so much that we're not even like recognizing. Like, nothing here is like accidental. Like, it's such an intentional performance, but it also isn't like heavy-handed. And that's such a difficult balance, I think, to achieve, that she does time and time again.
Yeah, she does. I wouldn't recommend this movie really, because it's way too long and it doesn't work at all times. But again,
but she is really good in it. She is really good in it, though.
She is really good in it. Anyway, while we can't really recommend this movie, I think if you want to see a different side of Cate Blanchett's talent, you should watch The Missing.
I will rep for The Missing. It's not the best, but it's a solid 3 out of 5 movie. But what can I say? I'm here to defend Ron Howard and his crinkly face.
We can't leave this conversation without talking about Ron Howard's latest, which is Hillbilly Elegy.
Hillbilly Elegy. I mean, Hillbilly Elegy was the card was stacked against it in a way. It's not completely successful, but my favorite writing on this movie is Matt Zoller Seitz' review of it on Ebert Voices. I think he really sort of, for me, explains the weird ground. I mean, it's released at the tail end of America's political exorcism, or what you'll call it, and it's based on this book that was so controversial, and it's classic Ron Howard in that he sort of cuts off all of the outward looking stuff from the book, because the movie isn't that political polemic that the book is, but
Yeah.
it's hard to divorce the movie as is from the book, which people have so many issues with.
Yeah.
How do we approach a work that is based on another work? Like, what do we bring to that conversation, and how do we think about it? If the film is only an extension of the book, then like, why even have films anymore? You know?
If we're talking about a director of actors, Ron Howard in Hillbilly Elegy has failed his actors, and in particular, he has failed Amy Adams because that performance doesn't work at all. It's the worst she's ever been, and I don't think it's entirely her fault. She does make these choices to go big at every moment, even hysterically big, to a way that, but the performance is not a crescendo. Like, he does not show us this character of this drug addicted mother in her quieter moment. He just shows us her at her loudest moments. So it becomes a series of very loud moments that just don't work, because you can't play somebody who is always loud, this loud at every single scene in the moment. So if we're talking about the actor as auteur in The Missing, I think that Cate has managed to wrangle a performance out of Ron Howard in the scenes that she is in. And those are the scenes that are strong because she is so compelling to watch. But then he goes on and completely loses the thing that she's trying to piece together playing this woman, because he spends so much time with the other characters that nobody cares about, with Lily, with the kidnappers, and we spend like more than half the movie there. I'm like, why? And I think to the same degree, he has failed Amy Adams by never giving her even one quiet moment, which is why for me Hillbilly Elegy is a complete failure, and I think it deserves all the vitriol that it's getting because it's very bad.
I like Amy Adams in it, actually. Like, I don't think it's her best work, but I do like her in it. But also it's because I think I have this predilection for liking performances that are chaotic, and it's very much a chaotic performance. Like, it's very much her being risky. And even if I didn't like it, I think that Amy Adams often gets a lot of flack for, which I don't understand, for being not very adventurous in her acting. I appreciate her pushing for something. The film itself doesn't really sustain. I don't love Hillbilly Elegy, but I think it's fine, I suppose. Like, I don't think it's that much of anything on either side. If it came out at some other time, it would just be like, okay, that happened. Let's move on from there.
Yeah.
I do think Glenn Close does the film's best work. There are people like that, though. I think it doesn't work on film because film is not real. So you don't want to see people who are like that. And I think because film, like you said, is artifice. Something being real doesn't mean that it should be on a film. People like Amy Adams and Glenn Close do exist, but the film, I think, isn't able to modulate that in as much as we want to watch, actually. It's not so much that they're, for me, good or bad. It's just that, like, it's exhausting to spend so much time with these people.
Yeah, totally. Very exhausting.
Yeah.
That's how I felt after that movie. It's really exhausting. So it's definitely not my favorite Ron Howard. I have to go back and say Apollo 13 remains my favorite. But my only thing, and I like you brought up Parenthood. I think that's another good Ron Howard movie. But the point remains with Ron Howard is that you never know what he's obsessed with. So if you're listening to this podcast and you have seen a few of Ron Howard's movies, tell us what you like. And go watch The Missing, because Cate is wonderful in it, even though, you can fast forward the scenes where she's not. I grant you that.
Murtada is underselling The Missing. It's not bad. You can put it on the blurb. Andrew Kendall says The Missing, not bad.
Yeah, definitely not bad. Andrew, it was so wonderful to have you back on Sundays with Cate to talk about The Missing and Hillbilly Elegy and Ron Howard.
It's great being here. Although, like, I feel like I'm always doing like movies where Cate is at her least Cate-ish, and I'm kind of like loving my little niche in a way.
Yeah, that is true. So before we go, let our listeners know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on Twitter, being the That's Fine meme dumpster fire of online conversations. My handle is the Parted Aviator, and you can find my writing on Stabrook News. It's a newspaper in Guyana, where I'm from.
Thank you, Andrew. And a programming notice. I am going to Sundance, not actually traveling from New York to Utah, but just going to be on my couch watching Sundance movies for the next week or few days. So a programming notice, there will not be an episode of Sundays with Cate next Sunday. We will take a 2 weeks break, and I will return to more Cate Blanchett after that. And you can find me on Twitter at ME_says, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Sundays with Cate. And until next time, thank you for listening.